One piece of evidence Darwin used to support his theory of evolution was the formation of fossils. So it's important to ask, how do fossils form? Fossil evidence supports the theory of evolution, and the formation of any fossil is a rare event. Usually, only the hard parts of the organism, such as bones or shells of animals, form fossils. Most fossils form when organisms die and become buried by sediments. Sediments are particles of soil and rock. When a river flows into a lake or an ocean, the sediments that the river carries settle to the bottom. Layers of sediments may cover the dead organisms, and over millions of years, the layers may harden to become sedimentary rock. There are a different selection of fossils. The first is a mold. A mold is a hollow area in sediment in the shape of an organism or part of an organism. The mold forms when the hard part of the organism, such as a shell, is buried into sediment. Later, water carrying dissolved minerals and sediment may seep into the deep space of the mold. If the water deposits the minerals and sediments there, the result is what we call a cast. A cast is a solid copy of the shape of an organism, so mold and cast go hand in hand. A cast is the opposite of its mold. Both the mold and the cast preserve details of the animal's structure. There also may be a petrified fossil. A fossil may form when the remains of an organism become petrified. Petrified fossils are fossils in which minerals replace all or part of an organism. Fossil tree trunks are an example of petrified wood. These fossils form after sediment covered the wood. Then, water rich in dissolved minerals soaked into spaces in the plant cells. Over time, the minerals came out of the solution and hardened. Some of the original wood remains in the petrified wood, but minerals have hardened and preserved the wood. You also might find trace fossils. These help provide evidence of the activities of ancient organisms, and footprints are an example of that. The mud or sand that the animal stepped in could be buried by layers of sediment. Slowly the sediment becomes solid rock, preserving the footprint for millions of years. From fossil footprints, scientists can find answers to questions about an animal's size and behavior. Did the animals walk on 2 or 4 legs? Did it live alone or as part of a group? Other types of trace fossils include clues about ancient organisms. A trail or burrow can give clues about the size and shape of an organism, where it lived, and how it obtained food. Finally, preserved remains. These are things that are trapped in tar, amber, or through freezing. For example, tar is sticky oil that seeps from Earth's surface. Many fossils have been preserved in tar and have been found in the tar pits in Los Angeles. Thousands of years ago, animals came to drink the water that covered these pits. Somehow, they became stuck in the tar and then died. The tar soaked into their bones, preserving the bones from decay. Ancient organisms have also been preserved in amber, like in the movie Jurassic Park. Amber is the hardened resin or sap of evergreen trees. First, the insect is trapped on sticky resin. After the insect dies, more resin covers it, sealing it from the air and protecting its body from decay. Freezing can also preserve remains. The frozen remains of the woolly mammoth, huge ancient relatives of elephants, have been found in very cold regions in Siberia and Alaska. Freezing has preserved even the mammoth's hair and skin. Paleontologists are the scientists who study fossils. The fossil record helps provide evidence about the history of life and past environments on Earth. In addition, scientists use fossils to study the rate at which evolution has occurred. Scientists study fossils to try to determine the rate at which evolution occurs. Scientists are not sure how rapidly species change. One hypothesis, we call gradualism, proposes that evolution occurs slowly but steadily. According to this hypothesis, tiny changes in species gradually add up to major changes over long periods of time. This is how Darwin thought evolution occurred. If gradualism is correct, the fossil record should include intermediate forms between a fossil organism and its descendants. However, there are often long periods where fossils show no evidence of change. One possible explanation for the lack of intermediate forms is that the fossil record is incomplete. Scientists may actually find more fossils to fill the gaps in the future. The second theory is about punctuated equilibria. This accounts for the gaps in the fossil record. According to this hypothesis, species evolve quickly during relatively short periods of time. These periods of rapid change are separated by long periods of little or no change. Today, most scientists think that evolution can occur gradually at some times and more rapidly at others, so these might not be mutually exclusive ideas. Another question arises from the study of fossils. Millions of species exist on Earth, from tiny bacteria to huge sequoia trees. But what factors account for the diversity of species? Scientists believe that over time, different environments and different genetic diversity account for the variety of organisms that exist today through the process of natural selection. Different environments. Think of the different kinds of environments on Earth, from deep sea to the tops of mountains. An organism's habitat, the specific environment that provides the things the organism needs to live, grow, and reproduce, is responsible for many of the characteristics that animal might have. Organisms within the same species also have genetic diversity. They don't all have identical traits. Think of humans, for example, and how they're different from one another. It's actually very important to note the importance of genetic diversity, because species that are too genetically similar may have difficulty surviving environmental change. For example, a fungus once wiped out much of the corn crop in the United States. The corn plants were all so genetically similar that few plants actually had resistance to this fungus. Today, many endangered species, like cheetahs, have little genetic variation, and the lack of genetic variation may make them more likely to be destroyed by any environmental changes. Darwin's theory on evolution by natural selection explains how variations can lead to changes within a species, but how do entirely new species form? A new species can form when a group of individuals remains isolated from the rest of its species long enough to evolve different traits. Geographic isolation is one hypothesis about this process of forming new species. Isolation, or complete separation, happens when some members of a species become cut off from the rest of the species. Even an ocean wave can separate a few individuals from the rest of a water species. The wave can sweep some members of a species out to sea and later wash them up on an island. They may have happened, this might have been what happened to species on the Galapagos Island. And once they become isolated, members of that isolated group can no longer mate with the rest of the species and may become adapted to their different environment. These squirrels are an example of a change. Albert squirrels and the kebab squirrel both live in forests in the Southwest. You can see that they look different. You can see that one has a black belly while the other has a white belly. And while they belong to the same species, they have slightly different characteristics. One day, these two squirrels may become so genetically different from each other that they could become separate species. If we look at where they live on a map, we can see that they are actually separated by the Grand Canyon. And over time, if we continue to study them, we may find that eventually they become separate species due to their different environmental factors and their geographic isolation from each other.